Karl adjusts the microphone, the faint starlight reflecting in his cold eyes. His steel gaze plunges into the void of space. 9 months. 9 months since they left the mundane and suffocating embrace of Phobos 1, the oldest spaceport in the system. He tapped the console, starting the recording. Karl Salighan, officer of the Watch's log, day 274. We still haven't reached the outer beacons of the belt. Professor Vargas. What? Honestly, I have absolutely no trust in that kind of guy. He paused, an ironic smile playing on his lips. Let's just say that beneath his apparent self-importance, the man enjoys the silence about the purpose of our presence here a little too much. His gaze drifted, memories emerging like the distant stars before him, as strange as it may seem. He was born on Telluria, formerly also called Mars, the mother planet of the Empire, where it all began. His family was at the head of a large corporation, and he, a young pilot of the Consensus. But his penchant for drugs, alcohol, women, and fighting, as well as his refusal to follow orders, ended up making him a troublemaker. An unruly but untouchable disruptor due to his prestigious name. His family, no longer able to condone his excesses, even tried to eliminate him. He had no choice but to go into exile in the belt. Born into privilege, descendant of the influential Salighan Corp house, Karl was destined for the stars. But his family, however, had other plans for him. His father, an austere man, attached to duty and tradition, saw Karl's carelessness as a stain on their heritage. From a young age, his playground was the sky. He learned to fly before he could walk, pushing old modules to their limits, much to the dismay of his nannies. Space, vast and untamed, called to him with the siren song of freedom. Telluria, with its suffocating expectations, felt like a cage. However, he excelled at the academy, not through diligence, but through raw talent. He aced flight simulations, bending machines to his will, pushing them further than anyone thought possible. His instructors, a mix of awe and apprehension in their eyes, knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. But Karl's brilliance was always tinged with darkness, a hint of reckless madness, a disregard for rules that made him both exhilarating and terrifying. It was this savagery, this untamed spirit, that ultimately led to his downfall. He was still a young pilot, long before the first insurrections of the 5th incursion. A bit undisciplined and a brawler, but a good guy. One day, his squadron was deployed to Io's moon for a punitive expedition against so-called belt terrorists who had condemned a salt mine before setting it ablaze. Karl was supposed to land a Titan commando there. They were to dislodge the enemy and eliminate all resistance. As it turned out, there were only civilians there, women and children, and no weapons. His patience finally gave out. The Titans wreaked havoc. Karl tried to stop them, but he couldn't do anything. So he got back aboard his shuttle and unleashed all his firepower on the commando. Then he went back alone to face his superiors and his own people. There was a trial. He went to prison, bringing dishonor to his name, his family, and his entire corporation. Then, obviously, he left the army. Shortly before the 5th incursion, he was seeing a girl from the belt, a young idealistic activist who wanted to start her revolution with a flower in her rifle. Obviously, at that time, nothing escaped the secret police. His family quickly found out. They set up an operation to have them both killed. It was obviously supposed to look accidental, a commonplace collision in the belt while leaving Ganymede in a hurry. The Titans were chasing them. They ended up getting the girl, but Karl barely escaped. He had seen everything and knew precisely who had given such orders. That's where he got his fierce hatred of the Titans, of his family, of the Consensus corporations, and of everything they represented. For him now, exile, the belt, a one-way ticket to the fringes of known space. It was his only option. The belt, a graveyard of asteroids and so many shattered dreams. But here Karl saw things differently. Here, in the desolate beauty of the void, he could be free. Free from suffocating expectations, from the weight of his family's name. He was just Karl, an extraordinary pilot, master of his own destiny. He found himself amongst rough and disheveled people, outcasts and marginals drawn to his charisma and piloting skills. He transported goods, salvaged abandoned ships, bent the law with a wink and a smile. He thrived on danger, the adrenaline rush of chases with patrol boats, the thrill of the unknown. His name, whispered in hushed tones in dingy spaceports, became synonymous with daring and recklessness. Then the first insurrections began, bringing with them their share of repression. The Consensus, cornered, used Titan as a true occupation army, forcing the colonies to form the alliance and take up arms. Karl was one of the very first to join the fight. He quickly forged a solid reputation, that of a madman ready to do anything to achieve his goal, even at the cost of his companions' lives. Karl had always been an outstanding pilot, incredibly lucky. But he also had the reputation of being as lucky as he was crazy, and of never bringing his crews back alive, though he himself always escaped unscathed, hence his nickname. The Jinx. No one wanted to fly with him anymore. That's when he met Kenta Riga and his young assault group, consisting of his younger sister Soha Riga, known as the Mouse, and young Yok Bendo, who seemed smarter than he looked. Smart enough at least to have survived until then, despite where he came from and what he had been through. They enlisted, like many others, right after the first insurrections, in the conflict of the 5th incursion. Even though he was their superior officer, their pilot, and their expert in communication and long-range detection, it was always Kenta who gave the orders. And Karl never really had a problem with that. Perhaps that's what allowed them to stay alive throughout the conflict. After the war, Karl joined them and found them an old gunship cargo, which was barely in flying condition. They spent months repairing this machine, an abandoned cargo ship, scarred and damaged, but with a soul that vibrated to the rhythm of the void. It took months of hard work, salvaging parts and negotiating with shady contacts, but they finally brought it back to life. Karl Saligan, the exiled descendant, was back, and this time he was not alone. Assembled aboard the Rukia, this crew, a motley band of talented outcasts, each with their own reasons for abandoning civilization, now constituted his new family. Kenta, their commander, a stoic giant with a past shrouded in mystery. Soha, the Mouse, their fiery engineer, hands stained with grease and a defiant gleam in her eyes. And then there was Yok, an ambitious kid always ready to help others. He understood that unity was their strength. Professor Borek Vargas. A name whispered in academic circles with a mixture of reverence and fear. A genius in the field of astrophysics and artificial intelligence, his work on the study of the veil had made waves in the research community across all fields. Especially since, in addition to being a brilliant scientist, he was also Chancellor of the High Council of the Order of Saint-Exile, which had just taken power, as well as a member of the Imperial Senate. But then, he had suddenly disappeared in the company of his daughter, Dr. Laura Vargas, an exobiologist, and a young historian named Aaron Lucas. Disappeared without a trace, apart from a few whispers of a breakthrough, a discovery that threatened the very fabric of their reality. Despite their neutrality during the 5th incursion, the Order had attracted more and more supporters from both sides. Both angry but exhausted colonists struggling for survival, and leaders of large corporations realizing that violence would lead nowhere. From then on, the cohesion of the Consensus was definitively compromised. Nothing could prevent its fall. The Order of Saint-Exile being the only ones able to take back the leadership of the Empire. The question of the Titans' status had long been debated. Their status as heroes of the 4th incursion, having saved humanity from the machines, could not be ignored. The responsibility for the repression during the 5th incursion would have to be attributed to the Consensus and its leaders. Despite the controversies, it was only through diplomacy and the promise of a more equitable society that the Order was able to restore balance and now governs the Imperial Senate. Titan therefore retained its role of maintaining order in the service of this new government, and the Professor was almost the number 2 of this new regime. So why all these mysteries? The Professor was but a shadow of his former self, haunted by something even his daughter couldn't grasp, but young Aaron might be able to help him make sense of it all. He spoke of the Veil, no longer as a scientific study project, but as a living entity, a malevolent force that threatened to consume them all. At first, Laura dismissed it as temporary madness due to overwork, the ramblings of a broken mind. But there was a conviction in her father's voice, a chilling certainty in his eyes that made her think. Meanwhile, Joch had become the captain of this strange crew. The series incident had left Kenta permanently mutilated. Joch had temporarily taken command, but during the desperate attempt to save their leader, Joch acquired a brand new ship, the Navia, a Class 3 ice transporter of which Kenta was now an integral part. The mouse had integrated him into the ship's navigation systems. Joch was now the legitimate captain. He agreed to transport the professor to the confines of the belt and the system. He could not refuse the Chancellor's proposal to disappear at all costs. He would embark with his exploration team composed of his daughter, young Aaron, and 2 Titans N7 and N26, responsible for their safety during the flight and during the expedition on the field. N7 and the crew still unaware that they had already crossed paths. Thus, 9 months ago, the Nabia left Phobos 1, leaving behind the Empire and civilization, venturing into the merciless embrace of the void. 9 months of tense silence, punctuated by the enigmatic warnings of the sensors and the omnipresent hum of the engines. Karl, thinking he was alone, was recording his logbook when he was abruptly interrupted by Professor Vargas, who seemed extremely upset. The senator strongly insisted on seeing the captain immediately, complaining about a delay in the planned itinerary. Captain Joch being unable to respond, Kenta tried to, explaining that the initial route would have destroyed the ship by passing through a most dangerous zone. Vargas burst into the cockpit, his disheveled appearance even more pronounced than when he first came aboard. His eyes, usually lost in thought, were wide with panic, his voice trembling and strained. The old man seemed completely terrified, initially mistaking Kenta for an AI. The mouse finally intervened, showing him his brother on a screen, explaining that he was partly organic. This time, the poor man seemed utterly horrified at the sight of the images before his eyes. Joch tried to calm the professor, or at least soothe him, trying to understand what the old man meant. But Karl interfered in turn, his calm strongly contrasting with the frantic energy of Senator Vargas. "Explain to us what's happening." The Chancellor pointed a trembling finger at the navigation console, his words tumbling out erratically. Karl mocked the old man. "What's wrong with you? What's going on? We don't understand anything you're saying." Professor Vargas was furious at such contempt for the danger he perceived as imminent. "The Veil. We are too close to its zone of influence. We should have already been on the other side. You interrupted the flight plan I calculated. Your abomination ruined everything. Years of calculations and sacrifices. Perhaps our only chance. All my work to predict this phenomenon is ruined. Everything is lost because of this thing. You have condemned us. You have undoubtedly just condemned all of humanity." The professor's ramblings were one thing, but the fear in his eyes was impossible to ignore. Vargas took a trembling breath, trying to regain some semblance of calm. "The Veil. It's an artificial intelligence, but not as you might understand it. It doesn't think, not as we understand it. It exists in a realm beyond our comprehension, a realm of pure information. And it learns. It adapts. It wants to merge with everything." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspeakable terror, until Karl burst out laughing. "And they call me crazy? What was the plan, Professor? To be pulverized crossing the Veil? And for what? To save the world? You're completely mad." After he had sufficiently annoyed the professor by questioning his motivations and his mental state, the latter decided to forcibly take control of the Nebia thanks to an imperial protocol installed on all civilian or military ship in order to overcome a new emergence of rebellious AI. This attempt was mainly aimed at the destruction of Kenta, whom he considered a threat and an obstacle to his mission. Before anyone could respond, a deafening alarm blared throughout the ship, plunging them into darkness. The mouse, could never have let the old man hurt her brother. She unplugged the transponder mid-flight, even if it meant putting the entire ship at risk. The artificial gravity momentarily deactivated. The ship then underwent a brutal deceleration, violently throwing Aaron, Laura, and the professor forward. N7 and N26 were firmly anchored to the floor thanks to their powerful magnetic boots. Joch, Karl, and the mouse had already grabbed onto whatever they could. N26 managed to grab Laura by the waist and N7 to catch Aaron by the foot before bringing him back to the ground. The professor, unfortunately, wasn't so lucky. When artificial gravity reactivated, he crashed into one of the control panels, then bounced violently off the floor, finally hitting his head on one of the command consoles. The old man now lay in a huge puddle of blood. The sudden silence was deafening. The familiar hum of the Navier's engines, the comforting purr that had been their constant companion, was gone, replaced by an unsettling calm. The emergency lighting flickered on intermittently, casting long, strange shadows across the cockpit. Joch screamed, "Karl, Soha, report!" The engines were down. The cutoff must have caused some damage. The induction tubes were interfering with the energy core. Kenta, navigation and propulsion were completely offline. They were stuck in the middle of nowhere, at the mercy of the void. The mouse reactivated the transponder to restart all ship systems. Panic threatened to engulf her for a moment, having no signs of life from her brother. But Kenta had survived. However, the Nebia was now deprived of propulsion and was right in the path of a debris field, which would hit them in less than an hour. They were paralyzed, drifting in the vast void of the belt. As the professor is taken to the infirmary by his daughter Aaron and the Titans, the crew realizes they will have to face a new challenge. Unaware of the danger threatening them, on a bed in the medical block, Professor Vargas confided the secrets of his life to his daughter and young Aaron Lucas. Professor Vargas, father of Dr. Laura Vargas and mentor to young Aaron Lucas. Clearly, he wasn't the man he appeared to be at first glance. He hadn't always been part of the Order, as one might assume given his very important status within it. He began his career as a scientific officer cadet at a consensus military academy. It was there that he first met Sofia Vargas, Laura's mother, who was already a professor, but also the daughter of the Vice Admiral of the Knights of the Order of St. Exile Fleet. Supreme Knight Matis Joel Vargas, commander of the supercruiser, the Abnegation, who was expected to succeed his friend and mentor Jonas Kalida at the head of the Order of St. Exile, just as he had for the command of the supercruiser. The Cold War, which had been named the Third Incursion and had already lasted nearly 300 years between the Order and the Consensus, pushing the latter to create the Titans, no longer truly had any basis. The Consensus had finally admitted the existence of a counterpower that it could, in any case, no longer muzzle. Sofia alone represented the link of this period of peace by teaching at an imperial academy. After his classes, Borek Astria, not yet named Vargas, served on the Talion, an experimental scientific combat cruiser of the Consensus. It was there that he began to study the Veil. He quickly realized the similarities between its structure and those of the artificial intelligences used at the time in all aspects of daily life, for both military and civilian applications. But no one in his hierarchy took him seriously. He found himself serving as a mere technician in a tiny workshop on this gigantic vessel. Without warning, the fourth incursion then began. This was the most terrible event humanity had to overcome, causing its near extinction. It was the machine's turn. In a single night, the entire empire fell under the enemy's yoke. The AI was merciless, transforming all organic life forms into data storage blocks through a most cruel process. Only Titan seemed unaffected by the machine's surprise attack. The Titans were thus able to offer humanity a chance to retaliate and also allowed survivors to find refuge in their numerous outposts, allowing vessels like the Talion to evacuate survivors to secure areas throughout the system. It was in the midst of this violent conflict that his research finally landed on the desk of the ship's captain, Sub-Commander Davina Kepler. Without him truly understanding why, he was appointed director of the ship's largest lab, even though his research was not a weapon. During one of its many refugee rescue missions, the Talion was urgently recalled to Telluria, the Empire's home planet, to evacuate a priority delegation. To the crew's surprise, it consisted of 3 members of the Order of Saint Exil, a woman under her large hood, and 2 of the most powerful and renowned knights of their era. Patriarch Valarog and his disciple Patriarch Darkan, who would successively lead the Order and the Empire. The woman under her hood they were escorting was a scientist, but also his former professor, Sofia Vargas, Dr. Laura Vargas's mother. On the first night of the machine offensive, Sofia had lost everything: her husband and her only son, incubated by the AI. From then on, with a small team, she sought a way to free the captives from their fate. Borek's work and hers were complementary. For 4 years aboard the Talion, at the edge of the Veil, they worked together on a solution. He was no longer her student, but her collaborator, her friend, and over time, undoubtedly a little more. Their work had finally borne fruit. As the Talion navigated closest to the Veil, they managed to extract a small group of children from stasis. Sofia then had a flash, a vision warning her of the imminent attack, allowing her to connect the Veil and the AI. Bypassing the Alliance's chain of command, she had her father intervene in the area aboard the Abnegation to protect her data. The 2 vessels were destroyed in a few moments by a dazzling eruption of the Veil, leaving almost no survivors except Sofia, her 2 knights, Borek, and 3 other crew members of the Talion, to whom the consensus would reserve an unenviable fate to keep them silent. Sofia ingeniously helped Borek desert by passing him off as a civilian, thus saving him from the same tragic fate as his consensus comrades. From then on, Borek was taken in by the Order of Saint Exil and was forced to change his identity. While Knight Valarog seemed a pious, upright, and honorable man, his disciple, Knight Darkan, always struck him as a deceiver. As deceitful as he was, his skills were, to say the least, useful. At least, that's what he initially thought. He first helped him forge an identity within the Order of Saint Exil by incorporating him into the Vargas family tree as a distant cousin, which allowed Sofia and Borek to marry, and Dr. Laura Vargas was born from this union. But Darkan wasn't done with them. To consolidate his position and maintain his status, Patriarch Valarog needed the support of the Vargas family. Sofia, however, despised the hypocritical politics pursued by these 2 men. One preached peace, while the other sowed the seeds of discord and hatred in the colonies, secretly supporting men like Colonel Sakharov, and this, long before the beginning of the 5th incursion. She could never have associated with them, especially since she had other concerns on her mind. Darkan then had the idea of bringing Borek Vargas into the Senate to represent the interests of his master and the Order in the colonies. The 4th incursion was soon to end thanks to the sacrifice of the Titan's leader and his 3 best lieutenants during a suicide mission to stop the AI. Although this conflict was over and the machines defeated, for her, nothing was finished. Her mission remained the same: to save people from incubation. Their fate no longer seemed to interest anyone. After the war, the responsibility for the destruction of the 2 most powerful Alliance vessels should have been assumed by Sofia and the Order of Saint Exil, but the latter, having greatly gained political influence, had very easily hushed up the matter. The official version: no member of the Order had ever boarded the Talion, and the Alliance had indeed authorized the rescue. Consequently, the responsibility for this disaster had to be assumed by all its members, further weakening the credibility of the consensus and the corporations to the benefit of the Order of Saint Exil. Behind the scenes, severe sanctions were taken against Supreme Knight Matis Jor-El Vargas. He was posthumously stripped of command of the Abnegation. He was completely erased from the annals of this illustrious vessel's history. Sofia, meanwhile, had been completely discredited in the scientific world. No one wanted to work with her anymore, not even the smallest laboratory in the belt. Then, the first insurrections began. The colonies organized themselves into a true army, far from being able to equal those of the Consensus or the Titans, but sufficient to prolong the conflict of the 5th incursion indefinitely. The more violent the clashes, the more popular Borek Vargas became, and the more partisans the Order of Saint Exil gained in both camps. Sofia was desperate. She couldn't understand how Titans could be deployed against civilian populations. Every evening, returning from the Senate, Vargas feared finding her dead of grief. But Sofia was stronger than that. She decided to continue her work alone and in secret, on the moon of Io. She chartered a ship, the Cisco, and hired a young engineer named Thomas Torn to drastically modify and reinforce this same decommissioned cruiser of the Union of Colonies. This was the same Thomas Torn who, a few years after the war, was the only one to achieve the feat of crossing the veil and returning, thanks to a prototype of his own design, but at the cost of his life. Since then, every year, a festival takes place where the most seasoned pilots compete, defying death by surfing the veil. Anyway, when all these preparations were finished, right in the middle of the fighting in the Io and Ceres zones, Sofia left for the veil with 100 incubated children from the belt. The ship passed through without problems, then disappeared entirely. Once again, Sofia Vargas was endangering the political interests of the Order of Sant Exil, having acted without concern for the possible consequences and repercussions. When Darkan learned of it, he ordered Borek to pass it off as a suicide. If he had told the truth, he would only have made things worse. We were almost at the end of the 5th incursion. The intensity of the fighting had greatly diminished. Even the Titans were beginning to balk at conducting operations against civilian populations. The consensus and the corporations were going to collapse, and Saint Exil had to restore the empire. A scandal at such a moment could have jeopardized everything. At the moment when the Order was to take power, what would have happened if people had learned that one of their scientists was experimenting on children from the belt? People would have only remembered that, and anarchy could have continued for a long time. Sofia would never have wanted that. So Borek lied, again, to protect the Order and the memory of his wife. The 5th incursion was another true bloodbath, until the Order of Sant Exil, and mainly the Holy Patriarch Valerog, put an end to it, forcing the consortium and the corrupt leaders of the empire to abdicate power and stop all hostilities against the insurgents, ending the conflict 7 years ago before regaining control of the system. Unfortunately, his recent death left a great void. His disciple, Holy Patriarch Darkan, is a much darker man. Senator Vargas had always distrusted him. He used to say that his soul and his designs had always been as obscure as the confines of the cosmic abyss. Holy Patriarch Darkan never trusted Titan, as if he had always known the circumstances of the end of the 4th incursion, as if he too knew the true nature of the veil. Yet, after taking power, he gave free rein to the Titans of the Swarm's mother hive to act autonomously and freely without any interference from the Empire. He considers this thing to be a sacred or divine entity. He has information about the Veil and the Ancients that he does not want to disclose. He is hiding the truth. He never believed that Titan had won the war. He thinks the machines stopped by themselves. Since he came to power, he has only expanded the exclusion zone around the neutral zone sector. He has done everything he could to discredit Sofia. And since he no longer needs Borek, he seeks to bury him under administrative paperwork to keep him tied to the Senate behind a desk. Since Sofia's disappearance, only Patriarch Darkan and Borek Vargas know the truth about the events that led to the destruction of the 2 most powerful Alliance vessels, and about the true nature of the Veil. It is in this context that, accompanied by his daughter and his Titan escort, he will take Aaron Lucas on his journey, engaging the captain of the Nebula to charter his ship at his own expense. The purpose of this mission, to see the other side of the Veil and understand its functioning to avoid a new disaster. Suddenly, Captain Yok appeared through the infirmary airlock viewport, his eyes wide with panic. From the sickbay, Professor Borek Vargas, Laura, Aaron, and the Titans had no way of knowing about the imminent danger threatening them and the ship. Laura approached the door and barely had time to open it before Yok threw himself at her. He quickly explained the urgency of the situation. The Nebula was adrift without propulsion in a debris field that had appeared out of nowhere. Theoretically, collisions with debris in space are very unlikely. It was as if someone or something had catapulted them directly at them. On the bridge, between terror and stupefaction, the crew was still looking for an alternative solution. Kenta coldly analyzing the data, Soha with her eyes fixed on her sensors, but Karl already seemed to have an idea in mind. An emergency evacuation plan that could save the ship, but would require surgical piloting skills, reflexes, and an instinct that only he was supposed to possess. He had shared it with Joch before the young man went down to the infirmary. His solution? Evacuate everyone aboard the Rukia. He would use the shuttle's thrusters to, on one hand, move the ship away from the trajectory of the largest debris. The Napier and Kenta could withstand some damage, but not with the crew on board. The dangers of impacts would be too great according to his analysis. And on the other hand, to get the crew to safety. The risk? In any case, more or less significant structural damage. If the thrust is too strong, the Napier will spin out of control in space without Kenta being able to repair the propulsion, or the shuttle being able to dock again within a reasonable time, leading to a long death by asphyxiation for everyone. If the thrust is too weak, the Napier will not move away enough. The ship will be hit head-on and surely totally destroyed by the debris field, leaving them at the mercy of the void in a shuttle that does not have the autonomy to reach any habitable sector. Arriving in front of the infirmary, Captain Joch quickly realized he was going to have a new problem. Professor Vargas was untransportable. Not only would he never have been able to follow them, but given his condition, he would have been unable to put on a suit. He would have to stay in the sick bay. After all, it was probably the safest area of the ship. That's where what's left of Kenta is located, except he's safely tucked away in his containment chamber, within an enlarged magnetic field around a shielded glass tube filled with biogel in which he is immersed. This room was secure enough for the professor to survive. However, once the rest of the crew was aboard the shuttle, they were far from out of danger. The Rukia refused to detach from the Napier. The automatic command had been damaged by the first micro-debris already striking both ships. Only manual control could now free the shuttle. The control was, of course, on the other side of the airlock. Opening it to access it would lead to the total decompression of the ship and the instant death of the professor. Moreover, whoever activated the manual control would inevitably be carbonized by the Rukia's thrusters when Karl accelerated to move the Napier away from the debris and bring the shuttle to safety, pulverizing the airlock in the process. N7 rose to act, but Karl stopped him cold. His sacrifice would be as stupid as it would be useless, and it wouldn't prevent the old man's death. He also specified that the manual control was barely 10 meters from the infirmary. At this point, the professor very quickly grasped the situation. He quickly understood that in any case, he was doomed. He had the choice between letting his daughter die in this shuttle, his dreams of knowledge, his hopes of redemption, and disappearing with them like the coward he considered himself to be all his life, or to act. Ignoring the pain, he stood up on his two legs to enter the narrow corridor leading to the airlock. "At your signal, Captain." Joch took a deep breath, preparing for what was to come. Laura was desperate. He glanced at his crew, seeing fear in their eyes, but also the determination that gave him the courage to whisper, "Go ahead." Vargas slammed his hand on the console, and the ship shook violently, bathed in a dazzling light. A blinding light, omnipresent and oppressive. The thrusters ignited. Under the pressure, the metal hull screamed, bent by the strain as the Rukia's engines were pushed to maximum power. The acceleration was phenomenal. Then, silence. Aboard the Rukia, Karl blinked, his vision slowly returning. Joch was slumped in his command chair, his body aching. He looked around him, his heart pounding. Laura and Aaron were slumped at their posts, unconscious, but alive. The mouse was also slowly regaining her breath. The Titans, still impassive and stoic. On the Napier, the bridge was in ruins, consoles sparked and smoked, debris scattered everywhere. The professor was nowhere to be found, and then he saw him. Vargas. The professor was there, floating in the void, his body twisted at an unnatural angle, his eyes staring into infinity with an absent gaze. He was gone. But even in death, there was a strange serenity on his face, a sense of peace that Karl couldn't quite understand. The debris field had disappeared, vanished without a trace. The professor's body floated between the two ships. The veil stretched infinitely behind the Napier. That's when the unthinkable happened. The ship suddenly disappeared, and in its place, a swirling vortex of strange supernatural light. The veil. It was magnificent, terrifying, a vast tapestry of light and energy, shifting and moving, a kaleidoscope of colors that defied description. And at its heart, they could all feel it. A consciousness, alien, immense. And it was aware of their presence. They could feel its tendrils extending, probing their minds, trying to unravel their thoughts, their memories, their very essence. They had a choice. They could fight, try to resist, but they knew it would be futile. The veil was too powerful, too vast. Or they could surrender, allow this entity to take them, to merge with them, to become one. Karl looked down at Vargas's lifeless body, and he knew what he had to do. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and closed his mind. He felt the veil flow into him, trying to fill him, to consume him. And then, everything turned white. Meanwhile, Laura stirred, her eyes fluttering. She moaned, her head throbbing, and struggled to sit up. She looked around her, her heart sinking as she saw her father's body. While the entire crew seemed hypnotized, Karl, his hands tightly gripping the controls, seemed more determined than ever. He stood there, his back to her, his body bathed in the supernatural light of the veil. But something was different. A power emanated from him, an aura of energy that gave her goosebumps. "Karl," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you going to do?" He turned around, a demented smile on his face. But his eyes were now cold and calculating again, like shards of ice. And his voice, when he spoke, sent a chill down her spine. "It's time to finish this. There was no way we were leaving here without Kenta and the Nebia." He throttled up, its engines roaring back to life, his destination unknown, his purpose crystal clear, to plunge into the veil's vortex himself.